There we go. As we sit and wait. Perfecto. I think we're alive. Excellent. Greetings and welcome to Psychic Mediums Live, where we talk all about the spiritual, metaphysical, and paranormal. And I'm your host, Kevin Paul, a psychic and medium in Washington, D.C. And today our topic is the mystery of healers and healing revealed. And my special guest is Elizabeth Wilde, who is a healer and has been trained in Healing Touch and Reiki. And if you have any questions for us, please place your questions in the comments section of this live broadcast, and I'll get to them after our interview. And this show will be recorded and placed on my Facebook page, and feel free to share, and on my YouTube channel, both called Kevin Paul Psychic Medium. So welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for being on my show today.
Well, thank you. I am really happy to be here.
We've been trying to get this show together and coordinate our times, but we've had some crazy schedules. And so I'm so glad to finally get you in the new year. It's a nice way to start the new year.
I'm glad to be here too. Yes, it's a great way to start the new year, and happy new year to everyone out there.
So tell everyone, Elizabeth, a little bit about yourself. Who is Elizabeth Wilde?
Well, since we're talking about healing tonight, I'll start with that. I'm a certified healing touch practitioner. Healing touch is a modality that began back in the 1980s with Janet Menken, who was a nurse who for 50 some years noticed that her patients got better when she touched them. And I'm also a licensed medium. So I work in the intuitive, I guess you could say, also the subtle energy fields. And retired as a teacher. I worked with children who were visually impaired, birth to 5.
Oh, wow. And you also do Reiki?
I haven't done it as much. I started out with Reiki initially.
Right.
That was kind of what led me into Healing Touch. As a teacher, I was attracted to a curriculum, and Healing Touch provided a curriculum. I have to renew my license every 5 years. So, and it's reviewed very carefully by a board of people. So it's a little more involved. It was like working on a master's degree when I first was certified years ago.
Oh, is this for the Healing Touch, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Wow, we can't wait. I'm going to learn more about that. So what was your spiritual and metaphysical journey to becoming a psychic medium and healer? Because we all have unique journeys, and I always love to hear about your journey. And a lot of folks may be able to identify with certain aspects, and so it's always nice to share.
I think as a child, I loved nature. I loved being outdoors. I loved animals. I had a strong sense of understanding people and how they felt about things. Kind of an intuitive insight into why people behaved the way they did. I remember we had birds that would sometimes fly into the windows of the house by accident, and I would go outside as a child and pick them up and hold them in my hands and want them to heal. I didn't know specifically what to do, but sometimes they would fly off and be fine, and sometimes they would die. And I would always feel sad about that, having a child's view of things. Right. But I was always interested in healing, and was fascinated with health in classes in school. I was always interested in the human body and how it worked. I think as far as the intuitive stuff, I didn't think of that as anything otherworldly, or, you know, when they talked about psychic, it was foreign to me. I didn't think of it as something that was innate, and I didn't understand, I guess, the fact that it's in all of us and that we all have that ability. It's just awareness more than anything else.
And then training and practice and all that stuff, if you want.
Absolutely. And I think too, a spiritual path, you know, I was talking with a group of beginning mediums earlier today in a practice group, and one of the things we talked about right away was ethics, and Healing Touch also has a code of ethics and a scope of practice. But ethics are really critical, I think, and it's one of those things that needs to be taught as you develop. And a lot of people do develop it on their own through experience and through mentorship. But I think it's something that's always an issue and always something that we have to take into consideration with every reading, with every healing appointment, whatever we do. So a good, sound, ethical background to foundation in spirit, in the divine force in the universe is absolutely critical for anything else to happen.
I agree. I have a question about healing. When we talk about spiritual healing, we're really talking about, and there are a lot of different modalities, which we'll try to touch on. It's all about energy healing, right? Is that what it is we're dealing with? Energy healing?
Well, it's all energy. I think Tesla said that, who, if you want to look at anything, you have to understand energy. And energy is, of course, the basics of everything. Even buildings that are built began as energy. They began as a thought in someone's mind. So we know that energy precedes matter. We know that it happens first in the energetic field. Illness does, for example. A good medical intuitive can sometimes pick that up before it ever becomes manifest in the body. I think it's important to realize too that it's all interrelated. We can't separate spiritual from matter. When we come into being, we are spirit and we are matter both. So it's really an interactive process, I guess. And healing always has a spiritual component to it. It can't happen otherwise. And because illness starts kind of in an energetic way, it's made manifest in the body after it's become more dense, I guess you could say, before it takes root in the body, it has its beginnings in the energy field. And I think one of the things that's really interesting when you look at the traditions of healing in all of the major religions, as well as shamanism, there's always an element of reviewing, reflecting, what about your soul? For example, I know in the Christian faith, they often ask people to confess before they receive an anointment for healing. That happens also a lot of times with shamanism, where you go back and you look at where you may have left part of your soul. I know Native American traditions will say that a lot of times.
Right.
You need to look at where you've left a part of yourself and where you're not whole. So it's very much a journey of not having, I think, doctors come and fix you, but a real healing journey begins with you looking at yourself, looking at your life. Why did I get this illness? Why is it being made manifest in my life right now? What has happened along the way that has made me vulnerable to this? And it's important too to realize you're not being punished for being sick. I think one of the tragic things about a lot of New Age stuff is that there's this idea that all illness is a punishment or a reflection of you not doing something right. And of course, there's famous stories about a man, I think, I forget which tradition it's in, but there was a man with leprosy who was a great spiritual teacher. And someone asked him, one of his students said, well, why do you have this leprosy if you're such a great teacher? And it vanished. And then he brought it back. And he said, I'm carrying it for someone else. And, the reality is we don't always know why we're sick. And it may not be important to know the why, but I think the journey of healing always involves that kind of soul searching and that kind of reflection. There are people who don't leave a job, don't leave a marriage, and they get sick. If we eat a steady diet of anger and sorrow, our body's going to break down. And we know this physically happens because A
Right.
cell is supposed to process amino acids and vitamins and all the things that we need to survive. But if you're giving it a steady bath of all the negative cortisol and adrenaline and all the negative, well, they're not all negative because some of we have to have them to survive. But
Right.
if you give them a steady diet of that, then the cell gets used to that and doesn't necessarily make best use of the things that can keep it healthy. So, so there again, it comes with how we see things a lot of times and where we are in our lives and our relationships with others.
So what's the difference between being cured and the healing process? Are they the same? Is that the end game of a healing process? Is it part of a journey? This healing, how would you describe this to folks?
Being cured and being healed, I think, are two different things. And I can give you the example of my brother. My younger brother was a very troubled young man who struggled a lot. He had several issues, including addiction, spent time in prison, picked up hepatitis C. At that time, there was no cure for it. Now there's medicine. But he had alienated many people in the family because of his lifestyle. He came back home basically to die. And in the last few years of his life, he worked through relationships with other people that he had hurt. He found a spiritual center that he'd never really had on a long-term basis where it had really nourished him and he was able to give. I was doing healing touch on him at a hospice where he died. And I would say that he was completely healed at the end of his life because he was completely at peace with everything that he'd experienced. Was he cured? No, his body died. He died. He looked really bad. His corpse looked bad. But he was totally a different person than the person that he was a few years before that. And I had done healing touch for 6 years at an area hospice here. And I saw that happen again and again. I saw people who were confronted with the fact that they were going to die, their bodies were going to die. And what did that mean? And I saw people in denial. I saw families in denial who could not talk to their family members about it. When you get out of here, we're going to go to Disney World kind of talking.
Right.
And but I also saw families heal through that as well. Still broken in some ways. And I think there's kind of this myth that when we're healed, we're going to be completely well, we're going to be completely perfect. And it's like they say, you're going to die with your to-do list in your hand. You're not going to have all your loose ends wrapped up. But that makes it more meaningful to be present in the present moment and to live your life as fully as you can today. So yeah,
healing is kind of like coming to terms with situations. It's what it sounds like, and it's part of a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
I think is what you're saying is part of a spiritual journey. And sometimes when you go on that spiritual journey and you do the hard work, then your body follows your mind. If it's it's not a dire issue.
Yeah.
So the healing is part of the journey. It's not like, here's the pill, take it and you're cured. Right. You're going to get this hands-on healing. Right. It's part of calming the soul, calming the energy, helping you work through issues, helping you understand issues. And so tell everyone, how does the healing touch work? Because I know Reiki you've been given the energy from your teacher and the process, and you understand how to tap into it and then pass that energy on to the patient. How is healing touch?
Yeah, one of the things I want to say about healing too is that I think the journey with healing is about finding meaning as well. Um, and therefore it is not just a physical process, but a mental, emotional, and spiritual process. Reiki is sort of an apostolic succession, from the original
Right.
Reiki masters. It's passed down, to your teacher, and you're given the sacred symbols to work. I think it's important to realize it's all frequency, and it's very different. Healers have different frequencies as well as a certain frequency with Reiki. Healing Touch, as I said, was begun by a nurse, and she created a curriculum, and she drew it from a lot of different sources. It's based on the chakra system, basically, but she had studied Native American healing traditions as well as Eastern healing traditions. So, as a Healing Touch practitioner, I had to read Barbara Brennan, Hands of Light. I had to read Rosalind Breyer. We had to read a broad spectrum across, I guess, a number of disciplines. We were required to do a case study where we had at least 3 to 5 sessions with someone that we were helping with a specific problem. We did community service. We had to have 100 documented sessions that were reviewed by someone who was licensed and certified already. What else did we do? Gosh, I've forgotten it. It's a lot of work. I've got to renew this year, so I should have pulled all that stuff out to look at it before tonight. But
So what's the process? Take us through the process of when you're working with a patient.
Okay, well, first of all, they're clients, not patients.
I was gonna say, what are they,
Yeah.
what are they called?
Well, I actually was reading people's notebooks, because you have to submit your portfolio to a group of people to be approved to be certified, and I was given a couple of portfolios to read, and one was from a doctor, and she taught medicine in the eastern part of the state. And she could not practice as a doctor while she was doing Healing Touch, because that's a dual relationship. So she could not say, "Oh, I'm diagnosing you because I know you've got this." So Healing Touch, we work in conjunction with the medical field. So that's part of our scope of practice. I can't diagnose, I don't claim to heal anyone, because that's not, even a doctor doesn't necessarily heal you if you think about it. It's your body responding to its own innate wisdom. We know that happens when a person's relaxed. So if I have a client who is interested in Healing Touch, the first thing we do is have an interview. And it's just a basic wellness kind of thing about, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Do you get exercise? What do you do to take care of yourself? How are your relationships? Just a broad picture. Often they come with a specific problem that they want to have healed. We have a 10-step sequence, which basically involves kind of an intake, like I said. We identify the health issues. We set goals of what we would like to see happen. I would do, I'd have them on the table, and I would kind of, I as a practitioner, I would center, ground, and attune, which means that basically I get quiet myself and yield to that divine intervention that is coming, because it is universal healing energy. I'm using divine, that's my word, not Healing Touch's word, but they say the universal energy field. And I attune to the client, and that means the only way I can describe it is, I put my hands on them and just kind of find a place where our energy kind of syncs up. And it feels, after a few times of practicing, a student can tell when they've kind of become attuned with a client.
So you actually touch their skin, right?
Yeah, but you can also do distance healing. That's just as effective. And for certification purposes, you submit no more than a few of those. They want you to actually have hands-on experience.
Okay,
but it's light touch on or above the body. The person's fully clothed. We may be above the body in some places. I do a hand scan, which is basically running a scan to see, oh, there's something there, go back and kind of pick up, there may be something blocking. It feels like cold or heat or a density or a thickness. Over time, you get used to knowing what certain things are, like certain illnesses have their own energetic feel.
Right, their own signature.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. So then there might be interventions, and I might do a full body intervention where I'm balancing and connecting and just getting the flow going. Or it may be specific. If there's certain pain, I may spend time with an elbow or a knee or an ankle that's bothering them. I may also use the pendulum. That's something that we tend not to use in the hospital or nursing home, just because it looks a little woo-woo, I guess.
Like divining rods or something. What
right,
is she doing over
crystal
there?
ball, So, like I said, an experienced healer will be able to pick up stuff and can tell where something is different, or when something falls back into place, so to speak. So then I do kind of like the actual treatment, and then I kind of assess to see where we are and to see how things are. A lot of times things are much more balanced and smooth and easier. Clients often fall asleep on the table and they apologize afterward, and it's like, you're supposed to, if that's a great compliment, to be able to fall asleep and just relax, and most of the time they do. Most people have a strong sense of well-being. Research studies have shown that delta brainwaves often crop up in both the healer and the healee, the client. So we know we get into an altered state. There's something about this that just puts us in the ozone a little bit.
What about the intention, the ritual, the energy, the magic?
Yeah, and I forgot, the intention is a big, huge part of that. Bad person for not saying that initially. We set the intention before we start to work on these goals here. So I'm looking at my client at the same time. I can note, if their face is more relaxed. With the patients that I had in hospice, and they were patients, they were the nurses' patients, although, I had to refer them as patients because they were there. The nurse would send me down to look at, to see people, and she would say, 115, 117, 119, ask in 121, the family's in there, check with them first. But somebody has terminal agitation, which is a state, in the dying process where someone's really agitated and restless. And these are folks that at this point are not able to speak, but you can see a dramatic difference in their breathing, facial relaxed, bodies relaxed. A lot of times there's less pain, so they can become alert and be with family. We had a wonderful medical staff where I worked, who the doctors would sometimes say, go see the patient before I go in and add more pain medication, because a lot of times they would relax and feel less pain, and then we're able, to be part with the family. And then at the end of the session, I would, check with the client, see how they feel. And we would create a plan for some growth work. There's certain healing techniques that we teach as well that they can do for themselves, like in first thing in the morning and before they go to bed. If I need to refer them, I will, to a doctor if they haven't seen a doctor yet, or to a chiropractor, or a therapist. So I'll make referrals as well to other clinicians.
Oh, it sounds really comprehensive. This,
I think it is,
versus a traditional energy healer is all about finding the blockages, clearing them with whatever ritual they have, and then you get the energy flowing again. And you guys are doing that, and you're looking at the whole client and saying, okay, well, talk therapy, some chiropractic care, maybe, check out a massage, some, soft tissue work. It's really comprehensive. I've never heard of energy healing in an integrated sense like that. That's impressive.
Well, if anyone out there that's listening that's a nurse, you can get nursing credits for taking Healing Touch classes. We're,
Mm.
the Holistic Nurses Association recognizes Healing Touch for CEUs, and in fact, I think massage therapists can also do that.
Hmm.
So, Healing Touch program is what you want to look up, and you can find more information about it.
Ooh,
And you
how
don't
long?
have to be certified to get the benefits. You can take a level 1 class, which is mostly working with pain and
Mhm.
basic energy stuff. And you know, I've taught it to little kids when I was working with kids. You get a boo-boo, or the first thing you do when you bang your elbow is you rub it. So you're already, changing the energy around and moving those
Mm.
molecules of pain and sending in love. So it's
Right.
something we've done all of our lives. We just didn't think about it.
Wow. I love this healing touch concept. Now, compare it to Reiki. Reiki is just don't touch the body, but use the energy, feel the energy, feel where the blockages are,
Mhm.
and then either put energy into it or clear energy, blockages out. How would you compare those two?
Um, well, our program at the hospice where I worked, we used both Reiki practitioners and Healing Touch practitioners,
Mm-hmm.
and we would sometimes work together. Um, One of the things that's wonderful, I mean, I think I don't know that yeah. With patients, for example, that have dementia, a lot of times they're alarmed if you bring hands near them. With Healing Touch, we would be moving our hands more, although
Right.
there are specific Healing Touch techniques that are similar to Reiki where you do send energy and not move. So the only thing I can say about the difference is it has a different feel to me. I think because I've been practicing Healing Touch so long, I get more information that comes to me than I do with Reiki. I'm more in an altered state with Reiki, and well, with both situations, you're sending energy, and the client. Basically, what a healer does is take universal healing energy and move it with their body into a frequency the patient can use.
So
So
the
the
energy is
client,
coming from outside of the practitioner,
yes.
the healer, and into. Um,
Now there are some energy modalities, and I think spiritism, that's so popular in Brazil, has a type of healing where you're actually using your own body's
your
energy
own
to do that.
psychic healing. I think it's also called psychic or spiritual healing, where you're using your
Yeah,
own energy to help heal versus using that universal healing energy.
yeah.
It's either been passed down apostolically or, you tapping into it. That's interesting. Yeah, this so for
And that
people.
feels different to me. I had done a class with some spiritists in that type of healing, and it feels much more dense and heavy, probably because it's coming from a human body that's in a body. But it's fascinating to feel the different feels, I guess, of all the different
Mhm.
modalities.
And it's probably a bit more draining because if you're either are you giving them your energy or you're just able to tap into, I don't know how that goes for psychic or spiritualist healing versus what you guys are doing. You're kind of calling on and tapping into universal healing energy and then
Mhm.
moving it through you versus having it being extracted from your body. um, it's kind of heady, isn't it? I'm going to be doing the healing using my own energy versus, all right, I'm just going to tap into the universal healing energy. It's like,
Yeah.
what resonates with you as a healer, kind of a thing when people are doing it. So what advice do you give people who've been told they have healing abilities, or they, you know, had a reading and, oh, you're a natural healer? What do they need to do? What are their first
Well, I
things?
think pursue it for one thing. We certainly need all the healers we can get. And
How do they
I
do
think
that?
it's different for different people. Some people are really drawn. I mean, initially I was drawn to Reiki, but like I said, I just veered off into Healing Touch, and I don't. I didn't really use Reiki much after that. So I don't know that I'm even, except that I took classes in it and was Reikified, I guess you could say.
Right,
Um,
right.
uh,
The hands were placed
yeah, I
upon
was
you,
attuned, I think is what they say.
not
But
ordained.
yeah, ordained, I don't know. Um, I would say learn about it as much as you can, practice as much as you can, really get in tune with your own physical body and your own energy.
Mhm.
Um, I remember about 10 years ago, I was walking down the hall of my house and I suddenly thought, I'm going to get the flu. And I was like, no, I'm not. Stop that thought, and it's like, I'm healed, I'm good, I'm good. But within a few days, I was running a fever. And so I had picked up on the fact that I'd picked up the
Yeah,
flu virus somehow.
you already
I'd
got
already gotten it.
the body
And
got the memo and you just read it.
that's right.
Like,
Which
oh,
later I thought about, and I thought, if I had been a little more awake, perhaps a few weeks before, I might have picked up on, I'm feeling kind of tired. This is a time when I probably need to go to bed early and, eat a couple of oranges and just take care of myself in this way so that I'm not susceptible. But, I came down with it, got some Tamiflu and actually bounced back pretty fast. So,
good.
but, um, but
So
yeah,
for
get in
so for
tune with your own body, know
get
your
into
body.
know your body, and if you want to start classes, just know that Reiki is probably a quicker way to get kind of certified. It's only a few courses over a week, this weekend or that weekend. Learn about psychic healing or spiritual healing, and those are from spiritual churches, for example, where you're using your own energy versus using and tapping into universal healing energy. What resonates with you? And then healing touch really sounds like it's like the next step. Once you kind of get your feet wet with
Yeah.
a simpler thing, then
Well, you don't have to get certified. I mean, I just jumped in
oh,
full
you
both
just
barrels.
that's just
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I took all 5 levels, and then
Oh, okay.
just helped read portfolios and really jumped and helped run the professional association locally for a while. I mean, I just went whole hog, but you can just take a class in
Oh,
it.
so you can
Or
take it. That's a quickie too.
yeah, and
It's
I think too, besides the psychic healing, the spiritualist church, don't they also connect with guides and beings on the other side?
maybe so. Like,
Yeah.
their assistants. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've not been trained in that area. So yeah, that's where, folks, if you are interested in pursuing that healing track, get in touch with your ability to heal and to actually provide this service to people. Check out Reiki, check out Healing Touch, and then check out the spiritualist or psychic healing, classes.
Mhm.
Some are weekends, some are a day long, a few hours here or there, and see what resonates with you. Understand and ask questions, right? Okay, how does this work? Or what's the process? What's the intention? How do you do it?
There's
And
also so many modalities. I was thinking there's therapeutic touch as well. And
therapeutic touch. Okay,
there's
name them for us.
oh gosh, actually, I would
Shamanism.
look at that on the
Shamanism.
Healing Touch website, because you can apply for insurance coverage, to cover yourself legally, and they'll list all the modalities that you could add to whatever your insurance coverage has. Which, I don't think anybody can. I mean, if you're getting into trouble with a client, there's probably other things going on
Right,
besides the actual, you might have somebody that breaks a toe on the floor or something, trips.
right.
They're a little bit,
Absolutely.
ground them. Be sure and ground them before they get off your table. But
Have a very
yeah, there's
much
all
so.
kinds of things out there to explore.
There are even shamanism. If you are drawn to that indigenous native um, healing modalities, shamanism, where they're actually those are courses you take over weekends where you actually take journeys into, you know, into them and discover all sorts of, you know, this, that, and the others from their soul fragments here, and then you call on your spirit animals,
Mhm.
to assist. So that's a different field and different modality, but it's still about helping heal people.
Mhm.
So folks, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wonderful book out there of some basic shamanism books to help you understand that. So does everyone have the gift to heal,
I
to be a
think
healer?
so. I think everyone, I think it's in degrees. Just as, our physical bodies heal. And that can vary our ability to heal ourselves. But I do think everybody has, and I don't think you have to be special to be a healer. I think, and by that I mean you don't have to feel like you have to be a special person to heal. I think it's innate in all of us. And I think, again, like you were saying, practice and education and desire and intention and
You have to want to do it. I mean, if you're
yeah,
not interested in doing it,
yeah.
I always say people doing the work as a psychic or medium or having abilities, it's like, I think everyone has some basic abilities,
Mhm.
but it's like playing the piano. You can be taught to play with one or two fingers, or you can play with two hands, or maybe you can play in a little concert or just do it for yourself, or really study and, be a professional and play in an orchestra. So it's the amount of time and energy that you want to put into it. Um, and your innate ability and desire, it's like, yeah, I can, play football by just throwing it. I have no desire to play the game, but I'm not built
Yeah.
for football, but I have some desire to learn, and I'll learn some things and I'll be helpful. And it sounds like you don't have to jump in to be a professional healer to take advantage of healing and becoming a healer, right?
Right. And I think with Healing Touch clients, I will often give them a little um, sheet to take home where they can balance their own body, or to alleviate pain. You can stop bleeding by taking your finger. I did this on my mom a few years ago when she had gotten mosquito bitten and it was driving her crazy. So you just take your finger and send a shot of energy to that mosquito bite, and you can stop the itching and stop the bleeding where if you've scratched it. And everybody right now, if you're wondering about how this all feels, you can rub your hands together and increase the energy in your own palms, and put your palms, so far apart, and then slowly start pushing them closer, and you will start feeling something between your palms. It feels to me like a thickness, and right now I'm feeling the energy from my right hand on the back of my left hand because I'm right-handed and I was focusing on that. But I can feel where my energetic field has actually gone through this hand and is on the other side. So,
Mm,
so play with it. You can also see your energy field. You can hold it up, and you can look. And a lot of times, if you soften your gaze by kind of using your peripheral vision by looking above your fingers, for example, you can
mm.
actually see the outline of your energetic field, or the first layer of it. And
Mhm.
we actually are able to measure it now. I know there's Kirlian photography that takes pictures and stuff, but
Right, right.
we've been able to measure the electrical impulse of the heart and the brain with EEGs and ERGs and that kind of thing. But there's an actual nursing diagnosis that talks about the patient's field being disturbed. So it's becoming more and more part of our Western medical practice, I think.
Because it started, I mean, that's the way it was back before there was medicine. It's the natural remedies of nature and the practitioner who is dealing with energetic healing, as well
Mhm.
as using, the medicinal uh,
Yeah.
elements of their land. So
Well, I
folks,
remember, like for example, all the home remedies that we've had, like mustard plaster. My mother had had pneumonia as a child, and her grandmother, who was born in the 19th century, put this horrible thing on her chest that burned like anything, which I don't know how much mustard was in it, but enough. And mustard is still used as something that can help with respiratory infection. People chew ginger or peppermint when they feel nauseated. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's been around for years that we still do, and is still part of our healing stuff that we do every day.
I love it. Let's see if we have folks. you have any questions, put them in the comments section and I will see if I can find them and read them out. So while you're asking your questions, so folks saying hello. Let's see, what is going on with Elizabeth? Any upcoming events? How do people get in touch with you for a session? How do they contact you? What's the best way? And then we'll put that in the comments.
What have I got coming up? I'm kind of, right now I'm so involved in a couple of things, it's kind of hard for me to, you can reach me at the Healing Medium 1, I think. Is that my email?
Okay.
I have an email to my, it's like your own phone number.
It's the number 1. It's the number 1 at Gmail.
At gmail.com. And my website is Elizabeth Wilde, WILDE, medium.com, I think. And I'm really low tech. Kevin and I were talking about this before. I've been word of mouth all my life. And, you know, the pandemic has meant that I've got to be better at digital stuff, which is not my forte.
But they can reach you by that email address or from your website, see what's going on. And you've been written, did you write part of a book or were you in a book? What was that book?
The Last Breath is edited by Allison Gannon, and it was an Amazon bestseller in its field. It's a book about, this is the flip side of what I do, I guess. It's all related. And it's about mediums and the experiences. And I had written about an experience I had a few years ago that was really an amazing experience that I had. And of course, it's all healing. Mediumship is very healing, to understand the complete cycle of life and how life doesn't actually end, or let's say consciousness doesn't end.
Yeah, it's a ministry of healing, the work that we do. I'm not a healer per se, but the work we do as psychic and mediums, we do readings, connecting with those past loved ones, connecting with those people who are alive through a psychic. It's all about healing.
Yeah.
But at a different level, I guess.
Yeah.
No
And
hands-on.
Yeah. Well, grief is, you know, in some ways it's harder to, well, in some ways I think being a medium is actually better when confronted with grief, but in some ways it's difficult because that person is still so alive to you that the grieving process, I think, is different than it is when you're just confronted with the cold reality of not being able to feel or sense the person around you, as non-mediums experience it. So we've got and I'll put your contact information in the description. And then when I post this, I'll post this on YouTube. It'll be in the description as well. Okay. Let's see, for me, upcoming events, no, we're not doing any readings today, folks. I see that as a question, but I do provide free readings, mediumship readings as my kind of way of giving back to my community. And if you go to my website, kevinpaulpsychicmedium.com, then it will take you to services and you'll find that link that'll help schedule you for a quick mini. It's usually about a 15-20 minute mediumship session. It gives me a good chance to practice different techniques and give back to the people who follow me. And also, if there are other reading options that people can purchase, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but my passion is also teaching students how to develop their abilities to do this work online as a psychic and medium. It's basically development, elementary school development for psychics and mediums. That's the way, and I love doing it because everyone needs to be properly coached to have a good foundation. And I call that the Academy of Real Magic. Let's see, I have a couple of possible guests. I mean, I do all sorts of unusual fields in this world of metaphysics, paranormal, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. I did hoodoo. I'm going to do a voodoo priestess. I'm going to try to contact and do a session with a voodoo priestess because that is a religion and understand what they do. I've done chaos magicians and hoodoo practitioners and all sorts of unique
things, even paranormal investigators and people who channel and other psychic mediums. So it's a lot of fun. I love to do this to learn myself and to educate other people, to give them a platform to kind of get their point of view out. It's always fascinating for me to learn from people. Let's see, anything unusual coming up other than I'm going to be setting up a couple of these interviews with other folks. And if you all have any recommendations of people you think I should interview, let me know. I'll be happy to investigate them for sure. Let's see what else is going on here. Look at the questions here. Someone said, so true, the environment can make you sick and depressed. So absolutely. And that environment, you know, is where you live, who you're with, even your own, you know, within your own little world and your own demons.
Yeah, and you know, I just like to say to everyone, give yourself a break and find a way to love yourself, because we've been through trauma the last few years with everything that's happened. And I think it's very key for us to, I think all good health starts with loving yourself and supporting your own needs and self-care. You can't really be a healer without taking care of yourself, because then you don't have anything to give. But and that's always a challenge, but love yourself and find the good. One thing I want to say that I started doing years ago, we know that focusing on the positive helps your immune system. And I have a notebook that I call Immune Boosters. And it's basically all kinds of things that have made me go, oh, you know, when I'd read it. Like there's a picture of 4 of these big firefighters, and they're down on the ground. They're giving oxygen to 2 kittens that they'd rescued from an apartment fire. The people were fine. The kittens needed oxygen. Both kittens survived. But it was a great picture because there's this intense look of concern on the face of these firefighters giving these kittens oxygen. You know, a good story where somebody had something wonderful happen to them that they weren't expecting. You know, a stranger did something super nice for them. So I think it's important to dwell on those things. Be grateful. You know, there's always so much to be grateful for, no matter what's happening. And I think being positive is the key. So be kind to yourself. We've gone through a lot, and it's important for us to celebrate that and realize that we are survivors, and we're healing.
And we're, you know, we have to heal ourselves as well. And I always tell people it's important, careful what you obsess about, careful what you think about. If you find your self-talk going negative, I always recommend, okay, my little trick is if I'm harping on something that's really negative, I'm like, okay, I say the words cancel, and then I turn it around, I flip it. And so I bring out, if I'm fearful of, you know, getting an illness, you know, for example, oh, blah, 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 or whatever you fear, I would say, what's the opposite of fear? Change it to a desire statement. I desire to be in perfect balanced health. I desire to have a wonderful relationship, or whatever is, you know, just turn it from a fear-based self-talk, say cancel, I desire, start with those words, and then fill in the blank. And that kind of like resets the brain a little bit, because we all have these negative thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
All are like, oh, you know, so catch it yourself, because no one else is going to catch it. You have to be the police for it and say cancel, switch it around, I desire, and think of what's the opposite of that, and then move on with your day. It'll crop up again, but do it again. I say it's all about, you know, the narrative, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes I'll say, you know, to the negative voice, thank you for sharing, but I'm not going to do that. And I think, you know,
not today, Satan.
Yeah, I had a friend too who used to say, what time is it? Because he would say, I'd get wrapped up and I'd be thinking about this in the future and everything. And then he would say, what time is it now? Where am I? Here. And, you know, that kind of brings it back, because so often we're sending our energy into the past rehashing things that have already happened, or we're sending it into the future, speculating about things that might happen, and we aren't fully present in the moment. And you can't live your, spirit doesn't recognize that. Spirit only recognizes the present. You can't live your life in the future, and you can't live it in the past. And if that's where all your energy's going, then what have you got to heal with?
Right. And another thing I always tell people is, you can't, what's the phrase? The phrase is, you can't love yourself. I mean, if you can't love other people, you can't love yourself, or something like that. I think I should read that one up. If you really don't love yourself, you really can't love other people, I think is what it is. And so the question is, how do we start with self-love? And that's a whole new topic, isn't it? We'll have to do that again. That may be a new topic, folks. So stay tuned.
Just a little bit at a time sometimes,
Well, I think we've had a wonderful chat. I certainly have enjoyed listening to you and asking questions. And I really appreciate you being on this discussion.
Thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed it.
You're a pleasure to talk to, and I will be in touch and reach out to you and say hello once in a while, and you do the same.
All right. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone listening tonight.
Absolutely.
I wish good health for everyone.
Yes. And love yourself, and figure out, that should be part of, how do I love myself? What are my options?
Let me count the ways.
Let me count the ways. That's gonna be it. That's definitely
Yeah.
All righty, folks. Thank
All
you
right.
all for joining us. Take care. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.